إذن لحظات ونبدأ الآن للترحيب بحضورنا الكريم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مشاهدينا الكرام الافتراضيين من السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمي هو يوسف عبد الباري، وأهلا بكم في هذه الحلقة النقاشية والحوارية المهمة تزامنا مع شهر القراءة، والذي يصادف شهر مارس. نبذة بسيطة عن سبب تواجدنا هنا، ونحدثكم عن شهر الإمارات للقراءة. تحتفي دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة في كل عام بالقراءة تنفيذا لقرار مجلس الوزراء الذي حدد شهر مارس تحديدا شهرا وطنيا من كل عام للقراءة، وذلك لتعزيز وزيادة الارتباط بالقراءة حضورنا الكريم، بالإضافة إلى تكثيف المبادرات والبرامج المشجعة على القراءة. وتعمل وزارة الشباب الثقافة والشباب التي نجتمع وننضوي تحت رعايتها في هذا اليوم، تعمل على التنسيق والمتابعة مع مختلف المؤسسات الاتحادية في الدولة لإطلاق المبادرات المتميزة التي تسهم في بناء مجتمع قارئ ومتسلح بالعلم والمعرفة. أضيف إلى ذلك لكي يكون الجيل القادم والجيل الحالي قادرا على قيادة مسيرة التنمية في الدولة. بداية نود أن نرحب معنا بمتحدثين في هذه الجلسة النقاشية حضورنا الكريم. رحبوا معي بداية بالأستاذة إيزابيل أبو الهول، الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة الإمارات للآداب، والكاتبة ابتسام البيتي. أهلا بكما. طبعا سنتحول في هذه الجلسة النقاشية إلى اللغة الإنجليزية، وفي ختامها ستكون الخلاصة باللغة العربية بإذن الله تعالى. So hello and welcome everyone. We are here and we're gathered right here at this very promising dialogue under the auspices and of course with the very keen interest of the Ministry of Culture and Youth. My name is Yusuf Abdelbari, and with me right here is Miss Isabel Abul Hol. She is the CEO and trustee of the Emirates Literature Foundation, and of course the author Ibtisam Al-Baiti. She is a children author and an early years professional. A very wonderful day and evening to both of you, Ms. Isabel and Mr. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Yusuf. It's a pleasure to be with you and to be with Ibtisam, talking about something that is so close to my heart, reading at bedtime.
Likewise, so happy to be here with both of you.
Knowledge is power, to Ms. Isabel and Ms. Ibtisam. And I think the whole message here is that we need to make sure that the youth from early age and once they come of age, they must know a lot in order to possess the necessary amount of power. Now, let's open this dialogue and this discussion with the following questions, starting with Ms. Isabel. How do you evaluate the United Arab Emirates' interest in a child's literature and early reading generally? To both of you, please, Ms. Isabel.
Okay, so I don't think we can ask the United Arab Emirates what they feel about this, because the leadership has shown huge endeavors with the month of reading and everything else they're doing to encourage reading. And we have the wonderful Abu Dhabi International Book Fair, we have the wonderful Sharjah World Book Fair, we have our literary festival. So most of the leadership is showing a huge drive and push to help more people read books. But I believe that reading and the love of reading starts at home. So, I mean, this message is for parents. It is your duty to help your child fall in love with books and stories. And to do that, very simply, you read stories every bedtime. You let them choose their own books. So choice is very important. Not all children will want to read the same story. They might want to read a fiction book. They might want to read a non-fiction book. In the way that taste, how we like food, there is a taste in reading and the kind of book. So if you put a selection on a table for children and Ibtisam as an early years professional, they will all choose different books. And the illustrations in books are really important. And I think we just need, this message is really to each and every person. You know, children need to have time with their parents, with their aunts, uncles, grandmothers, family members, where they are winding down the day, listening to lovely stories, looking at the illustrations, and you continue reading to children long after they've learned to read. So you will do chapter books, you will do other kinds of books. So I think it's a really important habit. And if you have not been read to as a child, it may be you have to start somewhere, and it might be a little bit, you're feeling, well, I don't know how to do this. The only way is to start. It's to, normally with my 5 children, I used to lie on a bed with them or on a sofa, and they would all gather around and they would all choose a different book, and then we would read it. And scientific facts, 2 facts I'll give you. When you read or are read to, your heartbeat slows down and your blood pressure lowers. So what is this telling you? You are relaxing, both as a reader and as a listener. Now, that's scientifically saying this relieves stress, this relieves pressure. It's a good way to go to sleep. So over to Ibtisam.
Well, perhaps this scientific fact could be the explanation why I fell asleep sometimes during classes.
I'm not letting you get away with that, Yusuf.
Of course. I need to remember who I'm talking to. Sam, could you please also elaborate on the UAE's interest in enforcing the way of to have literature as a foundation from as early as a child, in addition to early reading?
So I have to agree with Isabel, and I'm so glad that she raised it as her first point, because as an educator, learning starts from the home. Learning starts from the house. And as a teacher and as an educator, we always say you can't achieve in the classroom what you would at home. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit and just focus a bit on the early years. And having worked in early years for over 9 years, our key factor was educating parents. We educate the parents about the importance of story time. And when considering the early years, I would say within the private sector, because that's what I'm used to, the UAE is doing a fantastic job, because within the curriculum of the early years, we base our learning on books. So we would have a story of the week, and based on that story, we would factor in other areas of learning. So for example, we choose, just at the top of my head, The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle. Based on this book, I would plan out numeracy activities. I would plan out science activities. I would do different activities. So I would say there is emphasis on children's books. And I think over the years, you see the KHDA getting involved now on their social media. They do post when we have International Book Day, they post costumes. There's been a lot of hype on social media. So definitely is getting out there. But as Isabel said, it's educating the people at home. And from there, we translate it into why it's important in school.
Right. Let me move to something, and Miss Isabel, you spoke about bedtime stories. I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about a challenge before getting into the bedtime stories. I mean,
yes.
I'm not that old, but I'm not that young either, and I come from a time where my mom would read to us bedtime stories. We would be so thrilled and on our toes. I remember seeing Mom coming back from the Sharjah Book Expo, and she'd come with a stack of books. Every story has a different cover color. And the sight of that would be like, ooh, what is that? You know, when you see something packaged, as a child, you can't wait to unpackage it. We loved books. So kudos to the printing institutions for making a book look so appealing. And sometimes would be grounded. If we're grounded, Mom would never read a bedtime story. Now, at the present, that's different. You have a challenge and an obstacle called technology in the form of a smartphone, in the form of a tablet. Nowadays, when I go see, for example, my niece, the children, when we gather as a family, the only way to have a cry baby stop crying is to give them your phone and let them watch something on YouTube. I understand that technology will never replace great teachers, and technology at the hands of great teachers can create great transformation. But before we get to how important a bedtime story is, how do we convince a child to listen to a bedtime story without the use of technology?
You don't need to convince them. I can guarantee you that if you start to read a story and there's little children there, they will crawl around. I'm talking about babies, 9 months. They will crawl and want to be picked up, to look at the book, to look at the pictures, to touch it, to chew it. Again, going back to science, we should not allow children under the age of 2 to have access to any iPads, phones, etc. It is detrimental to their brains, in the same way that you don't feed your child a diet of just sugar and sweets, because it's going to harm them. So we really need to be disciplined as parents. You know, no matter how much Ibtisam and all the other wonderful educators are doing in schools, also how much the government is doing, the parents have to accept responsibility for their children and their future. So every child deserves a good education, but that education starts on the day it's born. So, you know, there have been so many drives. For example, in the UAE, breastfeeding is encouraged. Women who work are given good time off. And I think I also read there's paternity leave now. So all of these moves are really good in helping parents look after their children, but in the way that you would expect, and you would oversee your children brushing their teeth from when they've got teeth, from when they're 1. You make sure that their teeth are brushed at bedtime, because you want them to have good teeth. You want them not to have to go to the dentist and have a drill and a filling and things like that. In the same way, you want your child to do well in terms of academia, in terms of career. Read a bedtime story every night. Just, cuddle up together. What are you saying to your child? It's not what you're saying, it's what you're doing. You're saying, I love you. Books are important. Let's share this. Sit on my knee, cuddle up close in a warm, safe space, and take time. Make sure that you've left your phones, you've left your iPads. They should not be there. No distraction. This is 10 minutes a day that you are giving over to your child. They then will fall asleep with lovely memories of you being close to them. I can remember back to when I was 3 years old, and I won't say how old I am now, but my father used to read us bedtime stories. And I remember that as if I was there, as if he was, God rest his soul, was here with me. So don't you want that for your children? Do you want them to just, this is what they love, a phone, an iPad, or do you want them to have those memories of language? You talk about language. So where do we learn our language? Where do we learn the names of all the animals and the creatures and the emotions? How do we become empathetic? All of those will come through books, but we cannot say, over to you, school, you educate our children. That is completely and utterly not the way it should be.
Mr. Tassam, well, perhaps you could also tell us, a child's personality begins from home, but not really from home. It is after you create those boundaries, and after that, that child goes and questions his or her reality and starts shaping who they are. How does bedtime stories assist or factor in the creation or the development of a child's personality?
So the bedtime stories I can't even explain how much education and how much development that occurs within the bedtime story. But first, before even we get into that, we have to allow the children to have a relationship with books. And how do we do that? We need to role model first. So if the parents show no interest in books, the children are going to show no interest in books. If the parents show an interest in books, if they see mom or dad in the evening reading books, they learn by role modeling, that by copying their parents. So if they see this is part of their routine, they will definitely want to do that. simple things. You can see the child gets excited when the teacher does something they want to do. I mean, Yusuf and Isabel, I can't explain the amount of times that during lunchtime that I would bring a specific fruit. For example, if I were to bring a banana for my lunchtime, the whole class the next day will be having a banana for their snack time because Miss Sam had that banana. She likes that banana. So we have to encourage them first to have a relationship with books, and then also to make it accessible to them. So small things such as, I see the amount of teachers that have their book corner where their books are on a very high shelf. The children can't reach it, they can't access it, so they will not be interested, in getting that. So these are little things that first we must develop. Let the child have a relationship with the book. Let the child see the parents role modeling it. Let the book be part of the child's learning, and then comes in the learning. With shaping the personality, so many educational milestones. One that Isabel also mentioned is empathy. Sometimes children don't have the words, they don't have the vocabulary to express themselves, but they could zoom in on a fictional character. They see that little that monkey, that whatever it is, elephant is crying, and they start to relate their own feelings with the character. Or sometimes they're uncomfortable to say something, but when they see it in a book, they start to say that character is good, that character is bad, and they associate they associate themselves with the character. So with their personality, so much is learned just by books, and also with educational milestones. So when Isabel, you removed your phone, little things that we don't even think about. So talking about younger children, small things that we wouldn't even think about. So motor skills. So if we're busy reading a book on a Kindle or a tablet, the children don't experience turning a page. Now, why do I want my child to turn a page from left to right? I'm developing their fine motor skills, which they will need for later writing. Now, if they're not used to picking up a page and turning it, that skill will never be learned. You won't believe how many children at the age of 3 that I've experienced that turn a page with their palm, because they've never been allowed, to handle a book. And how many children try to zoom in pictures in books? I've had children try to do this with illustrations. So having the physical copy, there's so much learning in it. So in their education, in their personality, they learn empathy, they learn their social skills. There's books about how, going to school, going first day to the dentist. So we can use it as a platform to teach the children. And can I also add children with special needs? So much can be learned. So I've worked with children, a lot of children with special needs or within the spectrum. Books are amazing to use with children with special needs because they don't have the words. You use your face expression. So if they cannot say that they're sad, you would do this with the picture, and they would learn just from your expression. So definitely, I like to use it as a teaching tool. Always, I will have a book. There is a teaching tool in it.
One important aspect, in addition to a personality, that does not make a person a whole. The other factors that make you whole as a person is cultural and humanitarian diversification, which is something that a bedtime story reflects in the form of the story, the motto of the story, the characters within the story. So does that contribute in intensifying the openness and tolerance in children? Ms. Isabel.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really, really good point. So a wonderful author told me, and I've borrowed this ever since, he's an Emirati author, that books should be both a mirror for a child and a window. So in the example of the mirror, a child should see themselves. That's really important, because if you open a book and it doesn't have things that you recognize, you may feel that that's never going to be you. That's really important. Secondly, so that's the mirror. You should be able to see yourself. There should be children who wear glasses. There should be children who are in wheelchairs, because if you are that child and you never see that, then you think books are not for you. You don't have a place in them. And also where we talk about the window on the world is other experiences, other ideas, going to space, going under the water, going back in time, dinosaurs, children, young children will tell you the names of 12 scientific names of a dinosaur. They know them off by heart. And it's because they have had that exposure to books. And I have to just mention what Ibtisam says. So when you hold a book, you are putting all your senses, smell, touch, and sight, and the sound, because when you turn a page, there's a sound. So you are engaging a child's, all of their senses, hearing, and so on and so forth. And that's really, really important. And what are they doing? They're doing it with another human being. We mustn't forget that. So it's not a machine. It's a teacher, it's a parent, it's a grandmother, it's someone who loves that child and wants the best. And so you're sharing that. So children's books cover all sorts, going to the dentist, going to hospital, losing a beloved animal, all sorts of refugee children. There are books on absolutely everything that are written specifically for children. And what happens is the writer writes. So in Ibtisam's case, she's an amazing children's writer, but then she works with an illustrator who tells the other half of the story. And for children who don't read, obviously they don't read when they're 9 months old. It's very rare babies read at 9 months old. They are looking at the illustrations and they are focused on what's happening in that picture. And when you turn the page, they're interested to know what comes next, in the way that when we hear a story, we want to know what comes next. And you will find, and Ibtisam will, I'm sure, back this up, that a small child, I'm talking about 1, 2, 3-year-old, want the same book time and again. You might read it hundreds of times. Why? Because there is a familiarity. They know what's coming, but they want that journey through the same book. And each time you may talk about something different, because you don't just read the book and that's it. You will have a conversation with them. And when children are older, so I'm talking about 8, 9-year-olds, I used to read to my children long after they could read. We would discuss the books we were reading together at meal times. You know, it would be, what do you think the next chapter is going to hold? Do you think that character is going to escape? So you have conversations around what's in the books as well. There was a global bank, 2019, the global bank under UNESCO did a whole survey, and they found that within the whole of the MENA region, the percentage of parents reading to children, this is the whole MENA region, was less than it was, say, in somewhere like Finland or France or Sweden. And also the other interesting fact, which I'd never thought about, was the conversations. They were having less conversations with small children because maybe there was this misperception, children do not understand. So with my grandchildren, a new thing is sort of that I had never had when my children, it was a baby sign language. So Sam, you do baby sign language naturally, but if a baby wants milk before they can speak, so 6 months old, they do this, milk. They want milk. If they want toast, they do that, and they would learn the sign, and then they transition to language. So that it's fascinating the way children gain vocabulary, gain language, and books are a huge part of their learning capabilities. So my emphasis is always on reading for pleasure. It's got to be pleasurable for the parent or the teacher and the child. It's not about testing them. It's about giving them choice as well.
Ms. Ibtisam, maybe you could share with us, how do bedtime stories assist in intensifying the values of tolerance and openness to a child?
So because in books you experience different characters. Now, even if the characters are not in human forms, there is a representation of what you want to, what moral you want to give, or what message you want to. So this can be, I can use my own book. So over here with this one that I've just published for Citrus, he's a sloth, but the main aim for this book was well-being of children. So little Citrus, he likes to make smoothies. The other sloths, they find this strange. All they want to do is sleep. And he starts feeling lonely. He starts feeling sad. Now, the message over here is teaching children what they should do when they feel sad, when they feel alone, who they can turn to. They have people to turn to as well. So it's making them accept that some children might have different talents, some children might be different, but it's at the end of the day, it's tolerating each other, it's working together. So in my book, Millie the monkey comes along and she helps Citrus. And she gives him and I'm not going to tell you too much in case you haven't read it, Yusuf, but she gives him an idea to make the other sloths taste Citrus's smoothies. So over here, it shows, I wanted to emphasize on positive affirmations for children, well-being of children, making them understand that sometimes they have lows, but they stand up, they don't give up, and they just keep going. So definitely, even within the illustrations, what did the author want to represent through the characters? What message does the author want to give to the children as well? So you will find different, and Isabel made a good point about the characters looking like us to associate themselves with us as well. But also can we attribute some characteristics with the same that we have as well, you know? So there might be a story where a child finds it, I don't know, difficult to make friends at school, you know? So the children will see the characters and see the characteristics and then associate them with themselves as well. So, and you know, books, you can get all characters, all sorts of, you know, animation. So it's just it's like a rich foundation for the children to get exposed to.
Right, Mr. Tissam, I want to get back to you with a question right now, but let's go a little bit to the past. Some characters were a great contributor to deciding who you want to be, what do you want to be. For me, it was cartoon characters as a child. I mean, favorite was Grandizer and stuff like that. Then as I was introduced more into cartoons, I realized that there is this, you always wait for an episode to come. But then I discovered that the manga version comes before the TV version. The manga as in the written form of the story.
Yeah.
It's what taught me that, you know what, there is more to reading than just bedtime stories with my mom. There is more to that. There is, I mean, there was a time where we, and as an educational system, as we evolved, you'd feel there are thorns in the book. You don't want to hold it anymore. The techniques that were used by some of our teachers, some of the genius teachers who I thank so much until today, they would bring those notes and they would print the notes and copy them, you know, for the number and the amount of the students in the class. Our teacher would keep the notes in his suitcase, and every day the notes would have a different smell. Sometimes he'd put a lovely and beautiful fruity smell to it. Sometimes he just put some sandwiches on top and the papers would smell like food. And our class session would be before the break. So, you know what? We'll hold that note dear and dear to our hearts because we're hungry. It established that relationship. On Friday, we can't wait. I couldn't wait to finish the prayer and go outside where someone would have the Majid magazine, the Athkiya magazine. Don't laugh, but I used to buy the Sayyidati magazine. I would buy the Hello magazine just to read gossip. And there were some sections I'm interested in. So now I come to Ibtisam. I see behind you a certain book right there. Al-Qa'idan al-Batalan. The two hero leaders.
Yeah.
Oh, from Cinderella to the Red Hat to the two hero leaders. Yeah. Which of those do you think has the biggest effect in children?
Wow, that's a hard question, Yusuf. So I believe that every book will have some sort of magic for the child. As just as how great this book is, so does another book. But in saying that, the books, and I love it that, you know, the UAE is such a young country and has achieved so much, but also I think over the last few years, we are really trying to make the children see how it developed, and we're using this in literature. So for example, we have amazing books like this which teach children how the UAE came about. There was a conversation between Sheikh Rashid and Sheikh Zayed and how they made the UAE. Now, in saying that, these two leaders represent heroes, just the way Cinderella was a hero, just the way our fairy tales, fictional characters. But the amazing thing now is we can see these heroes in, for example, school visits. So when I watch the KHDA pictures about expo visits with children, the leaders go to visit the children, the leaders go to shake their hands, and then that makes them excited. So it's their heroes are there, you know, and that plays a huge part. It's just like telling a child, well, we're gonna go to Disney, you're gonna meet Cinderella, you're gonna meet Spider-Man. Spider-Man's Marvel, sorry. You're gonna meet Cinderella, you're gonna meet all these heroes. But I think the UAE is definitely on the right track to make their children, to make the children, the expat children living here, want to follow the dreams of real people that have achieved their dreams, and they can see them in their visits. I mean, I love watching the sheikhs shaking the children's hands during expo visits. A favorite of mine was Hazza. When Hazza went to space, that week, the children all wanted to just talk about space. They all wanted to be astronauts. And it was so lovely because that was their hero. Suddenly, you know, we were printing, you know, pictures about astronauts, spaceships. But what the beauty about it is we were living it as well. So as much as fairy tales, as much as, you know, different books do hold their magic, I mean, and they do have messages, I think the UAE definitely is winning in educating the children about their vision, their dreams, and not just the thick novels that we've printed for adults, but children can now tell you who the different leaders are. Expat children can tell you their names, they can pronounce them, because we have these heroes there in real life, and they get to meet them, they get to chat with them. So I think I think the UAE is definitely providing such great opportunities for the children as well.
All right, then, Miss Isabel, allow me to let's refer to this question as a dress. I want to take this dress back and retailor it, all right? Because it's got to look really beautiful for you. Now, here we are. We're tailoring Miss Isabel Abul Hol. Who would you say was the most influential character that you read or heard about in a book in childhood that perhaps had a great deal in affecting who you are today and perhaps still think about it?
Okay, so two books. One was a picture book, which was published in 1911, called The Pirate Twins. And my father, I used to ask him to read it time and again. And it was about two little twins, two twins, they were twins, who had washed up on the shore to where this little girl, Mary, lived. And they would come, and they were, I think, quite naughty. And they would do all sorts of things. And she had such great fun with them. And then they would wave her goodbye, and they would sail off in their little boat. And she would say, but come back in time for my birthday cake. And they would, I'm sure they would. But it was a very simple tale written a long time ago. But I loved the words of it. There were just 2 lines on each page. And there were these really unusual, if you look at today, the way it was a beautiful story. But the one I first read on my own that still is with me, again, had a character called Mary in it. Now, see, the books I choose have got female heroines, okay? And Mary was a very unlovable girl who was orphaned in India. And her parents died of cholera. She had to travel back to live with her uncle in Yorkshire on the moors, which is a very grey, dark, forbidding part of UK. and she'd never met him. And so she then travels to this place, and she's very difficult with everyone. You know, what I loved about this story was to see how Mary changed from being this awkward, annoying little girl into becoming the heroine of the story, and about who influenced her on the way and what influenced her. So I remember exactly where I was. I was 7 or 8 when I read that book, and I can picture myself in that story. And I couldn't wait to get to the end to see, was she going to make that difference in this at the end of the story? So that one has had a huge influence on making me maybe who I am, in terms of understanding that as human beings, we're all flawed. No one is perfect. But if you are determined and you're prepared to really reach out to others, you can change, and you can make your world a better place.
I have a question. I'm not deviating from why we're here, but this is something that I'd love to discuss here. Allow me to use the word I for myself. As a media presenter, not myself, as any news presenter or a voiceover artist or a master of ceremony, whenever we're involved in anything that involves public speaking, there's an audience, and right after the event, we are approached by youth who aspire to follow the same path. And I've always been asked this one question: how do I become like this? Or do I get on a podium and speak like you? How can I speak fluently in Arabic? How can I speak fluently in English? The youth thinks that there is some sort of a secret recipe, or there is some sort of a magical button. You want to go, allow me to say this, you want to go to heaven, but you don't want to pass on. That's a bit of a contradiction right there. Back in my day, I'm sorry, but there was, my father was strict. My father was a military man. And I must say, a huge role was parents, teacher in school, and dad. My dad would force me to go to the afternoon prayer, the Asr prayer, where after it there was always a session to memorize the Holy Quran. Reading that holy book was a huge role in the literacy in Arabic. It starts from there. And after that, stories. And after that was listening to someone I loved. It could be a news presenter. It could be a singer. It could be a book. It could be a YouTube, motion picture. Now, how do we deliver to the youth that this is the formula? You have to make the initiative yourself. I mean, they say you should never gift a book. You have to go and buy the book, which means you need to believe in that book that you want to purchase. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there as a decoration. So how do we convey that formula to the youth, inscribe it into their own very genes, so they can become writers and readers of tomorrow, perhaps? Miss Ibtisam, Miss Elizabeth, please take your turn.
So that is a really, really important point you're making, Yusuf, because there is no magic pill that is going to achieve your dreams. Okay, so I believe that young people need to aspire, and that's why role models, influencers, heroes, heroines are so important. So you have to dream, but what do you want in your dream? And I can remember years ago, a group of students from Russell came to visit me, and they were talking about, and I said to them, what do you want to do? And they said, we want a government job and we want a good salary. I said, that's not the right answer. Sorry, start again. You want to know that you wake up every day excited about what you're going to be doing that day. You want to feel you can make a difference, no matter how small it is. You could be an amazing potter, you could be an amazing carpenter, or you could make beautiful clothes or art, whatever. But within you, each one of us have something that we dream to do. So try and find a way to make that dream come true. And guaranteed it's going to be hard work. Guaranteed you're going to get lots wrong, but guaranteed you will have such satisfaction. And a feeling inside you of joy because you have followed your dreams. So having enough on the table to eat, of course it's important. I'm not saying, but money does not buy happiness. Books inspire us. When we read about other people's struggles or journeys, or, you know, children's books or adult books or anything, fictional, non-fiction, they will give us ideas. They will feed our souls. And that's why we read. And thank goodness for your father who was strict. I think it's great to have a strict parent, because that parent cares enough about you to put in rules and make sure that you are following in the right path. And the Arabic language is nowhere stronger than in the Holy Quran. And the fact that you had that exposure, we can tell it with your beautiful language. When you speak English or Arabic, you've got a real wonderful, but that goes back to thousands of hours that you've practiced. You know, one of the books, what's the famous book where you've got to do something 10,000 times to succeed? I can't remember the name of the author, but it's one of these very big business books. He's a best-selling American author. Anything you want to do, he said, you've got to do it so many times. That you've got to commit to.
Yes. And can I add as well, not to put a deadline on yourself. So don't give yourself a deadline, and don't give yourself a timeline. So it's I think we live in such a fast-paced world that everything is instant. If we don't get it in an instant, that means, oh no, we've not achieved it. You know, don't give yourself a deadline. So when you aspire to do something, don't put a timeline on it. Wait. And I'm going to share a story that I had experienced when I was teaching in the classroom. I had a child. He was a little boy, and from the time he walked in, he was around 3 or 4, he would just go and hide underneath the table, and he wouldn't come out. He would not come out, and he would just hide underneath the table. He wouldn't speak. He wouldn't do anything. So the mom kept saying, he needs to be like the other children. He needs to, I understand, but I kept telling her, give him time. And the one thing you won't believe, during story time, you would see his little head listening, and he would listen. But if it was anything else, his head was down, or he'd be fidgeting with something. He wouldn't speak. And this went on for about a month. And I kept saying, just give him time, you know, so long as he's not disrupting, he's absorbing something. One day, out of the blue, the little boy comes out during story time, talks fluently, gives his take on what he thinks of the story, and goes back inside. So I was so happy to see that. And I told the mom, it's just a matter of time. You know, it's just a matter of time that he would have the courage to come out and say what he thought. Sure enough, he did go back into his table. But after that day, when the other children saw him come out, there is a happy ending. Slowly, he did come out of that table, and he managed to mingle. But my point here is, whatever dream you have, whatever aspiration you want to achieve, don't put pressure on yourself. Don't say, I have to do it now. Go with the flow until you finally reach that. And I think we get that a lot also from, you know, our surroundings as well. We just want instant results. So I always use, I call him my boy from under the table. I always use this story. Give yourself time, and one day you will come out. And honestly, he spoke so beautifully that my jaw dropped. You know, he spoke so wonderfully of what he thought of the story, but ran back in after.
That's a very lovely point right there, Ms. Ibtisam, because you might learn how to drive a car from a book, but you're not gonna drive it well until you go and take that car and drive it on the road. You might read as much books as possible, but in order to put that wax seal on that letter and make it official, you have to be ready. You know, I mean, for that child right there, in order for that child to express who he is, it takes a lot. I think one great factor that assisted in shaping that personality back in school was الإذاعة المدرسية, which is the school broadcast. Would come with a segment, and publicly speaking, we go in front of that mic and speak to the whole students in school. That assisted a lot in shaping who we are today. So again, thank you very much for making that point, because I felt like we have to make that notion. But let's jump into a question here. We spoke about the interest of the United Arab Emirates in early reading and literature development in children. Spoke about bedtime stories. How does a character contribute into shaping a child's personality, tolerance, and etc.? What about printing? Printing and distribution. That has a role too. But what do you think are printing and distribution? What are its major challenges and obstacles in the field of children's literature? And what do you propose to beyond those challenges?
That's a difficult one, Yusuf. That's a difficult one. Because, you know, for example, the UK, there are distribution channels that get everywhere, to all the bookshops, to the libraries, schools, etc. They're all set up because they've been there for a long time, and they've just developed and changed with the way things are. Within the UAE, there are extremely good printers here. For example, there are some very good printers who print very good children's books. Distribution happens, you know, they will be distributed by the publishers, but we have sort of, you know, major events within the Arab world that book fairs tend to be public, for the public, not for the trade. Whereas in Europe, Frankfurt and London and in the America, they're much more trade events. So they are for writers, they're for publishers, they're for booksellers and so on. Whereas here, as you said, your mother used to go to, or still does, go to Sharjah International World Book Fair and buy a huge amount of books. There are more and more bookshops, and there are very good libraries, and most schools have good libraries. So there is, you know, I think we are as well established as we can be, but what does not happen is there is not distribution across the Arab world. So books don't travel from different places. You know, books printed within the UAE are not maybe making their way to Egypt or to Saudi Arabia or to Yemen or other countries. So that may be something that needs to develop. And there's also, we don't have Nielsen book data. So Nielsen book data, if you subscribe to it, you pay a subscription fee. You can source any single book in the world in the English language is there, okay, that's in print. So you've got this huge database that has not yet been developed for any book in Arabic. So there's a more limiting thing, but this does not affect bedtime story, I'm telling you. Any parent needs to find a way to set aside a small amount of money or go to the public libraries and borrow books, but to make a commitment to read to their child every night at bedtime. And there is still a place for oral storytelling. I often will tell my 7 grandchildren, I'll tell them stories. So we tend to often do that at the end of a meal, and they'll say, oh, tell us about the olden days, as if I lived in the Stone Age. And, you know, stories, oral stories are also very important, because then they can, or we have games where I start a story, I create a character, it can be an animal, it can be a person, then they have to carry it on and we go around the table. So sharing those kind of games, stories, etc. really, children love it. Children love books, but let's give them a chance to fall in love with them. It isn't about learning to read. It isn't about textbooks. It's about the joy of stories that we as human beings need and want, and we need to ensure, if we want writers like Ibtisam, who gives a huge amount when she's writing children's books, if there are no readers, what is she doing? What is any writer doing? readers are required by writers and readers require writers. So together, we both have a duty.
Ms. Ibtisam, what's your look?
Regarding the publishing, I think I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But yes, I do agree that we need to encourage children. We need to show them. And I think you would find children workshops everywhere over here. You go to the Sharjah House of Wisdom, there is a section for children. You go to the public libraries. And I think it's just a matter of putting the effort to explore what we do have, and because there is lots available regionally, but it's just putting that effort to go find out what workshops are available. Because I think, honestly, I feel that the UAE does put a lot of effort in providing free workshops as well. So it's not even a money, matter in some cases. There are so many free storytelling workshops. We've got a lot of libraries. And I feel that there's been a lot of emphasis also on children workshops as well that they can, participate in. There are children competitions as well. So I think it's just the parents, the teachers, the school, establishments to put the effort to see what's out there, because it is there. So, yeah.
Well, let's close with one last question. Now, usually when you go watch a movie, there's a rated R or a PG-13, PG-18. I've noticed that stories nowadays have deviated so much. If there is no content, we've always spoken about if you wanna be known on social media, what you need is content, and what catches our hearts and minds is the content, the motto, the story. Nowadays, some stories may lack, and instead they put something entirely different. Something. It could be something physical. It could be something for your eye. Something for what you look at, however your mind does not see, which is not suitable for a child very young at age. And you can't stop a child if a child is intelligent enough to go and pursue a story online. How do you make sure they're reading the right content that inscribes the right ethical basis you need in a child, Miss Isabella? And
okay, so I used to always read any of my children's books that I bought for them or borrowed from the library. I would always read it, not really just to check on content, but because I think it's important to know the story, and then you can discuss it with them. So, I would certainly have parental stops on children looking at any content that's not suitable from a moral or ethical viewpoint online. And as I said, I think you need to be very careful at limiting what children can get up to online. It is a very dangerous place, But with physical books, most bookshops, most libraries, as Ibtisam said, are sorted so you have children's areas, and it will say, picture books, and maybe 6 to 9 year olds, and then 9 to 12-year-olds. So I don't really think that is a problem at all. I don't see that as a problem. But as a parent, you do have a responsibility. So if you were reading a book like Dogger by Shirley Hughes, which is where a child loses a favorite toy, but in the end it's got a happy ending. It is important that children's books always have a happy ending, even if it's dealing with the loss of a pet or the loss of, say, a grandparent or something like that. Because these things happen, this is life. So having a book where it happens to someone else and it gives them a chance to step back and look at it. So I think books can deal with difficult topics, and skilled children's writers and publishers make sure that they are morally correct, that no one would find any problems with them.
Miss Ibtisam, the smell of a new book, the sound of a page flip, and the sensation of licking your finger to flip one newspaper's page to another, to a child, how would that be? And what is its importance importance? Could you please elaborate on that before we close?
I mean, I think I read more children's books than adult books. I love children's books. Even if I were to go to a bookstore, you will find me in the children's section, sitting with the children like a big child myself, enjoying the books, laughing, and I love it. And I love the content as well. I mean, as we mentioned already before, look at the content as well, check that it's appropriate. But also as a rule of thumb, from an educational point of view, as a rule of thumb, before I read any story to the class, I must have read it before, not only to check the content, but to make it exciting for the children. I never, as a rule of thumb, read a story as a first time with children, never, because how do I know what's happening in the next page? How can I get them excited about the next page? So I always make sure to read the story. How can I make it exciting? You know, you can't read, for example, we're going on a bear hunt and not know which page the bear is going to come out, because when do you shout, there's a bear? You wouldn't know, where to read it. So check the content, but yes, just get them excited. And I said this in the beginning of the talk, be the role model. I mean, even if you're reading a children's book, be the role model, enjoy it, be excited that guess what our topic of the week is, get what our book, it's this book, even if it's a boring book, because you're so excited about it, the children will be also excited about it as well. But also, can I say that sometimes, let's say, as Isabel said, that there are some sensitive topics like death. Just because it's a sensitive topic, we shouldn't taboo it immediately. I think we're very quick to taboo a topic. Don't talk about it, If it's something that the child will experience, that perhaps maybe a death, a loss, books are, I feel, should be used as a tool for conversation. Even if it's hard to talk about, let's say a loved one passed away in the family, if it's too difficult to talk about that loss of the family member, you can use books as your teaching tool. You can use the character that faced something to get that emotion in the child. So use it to your advantage. I'm not saying you should read every topic under the sun, no, but things that are relevant, things that the child may experience. I'm a firm believer of not lying to children. So if there's a death, if there's something, you don't lie to the child and say, no, they've just gone on a long trip. Explain to them, otherwise that trust will not be there. Explain to them why this happened, and and just use it in conversation. And sometimes a book can honestly be, as Malala said, the teacher. It is your teacher. And often I've changed when I was teaching, let's say, for example, my topic of the week is, let's say, fruits, but on that day, if a child runs up to me and says, Miss Sam, my mommy had a baby yesterday, for sure, I will drop that whole topic of the week and we will focus on that. That's the child's experience. We will talk about babies. We role played. I got the children to bring in their baby dolls. We changed nappies. That's learning as well, So it's the child's experiences as well.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Ibtisam. I'm afraid we are out of time, but I would like to give our thanks to Ms. Isabel Abul Hol, CEO and trustee of the Emirates Literature Foundation, and to our author Ibtisam Al-Beiti, children author and early years professional. حضورنا الكريم، شكرا جزيلا لمتحدثتينا. تحدثنا اليوم في جلستنا النقاشية عن أثر الحكايات والقصص التي تحكى للأطفال فيما قبل النوم، عن أبعادها التربوية والنفسية، وتذكرنا أهميتها خصوصا في شهر القراءة هنا في دولة الإمارات. لكم جزيل الشكر. Thank you very much, Miss Isabel and Ibtisam. والسلام عليكم.
Thank you, Yusuf, and goodbye to all who tuned in to listen.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.